if you smell what the Rock is cooking.
Acknowledge me.
You don't know what hard times are, Daddy.
We are bad to the bone. Get it? Bad to the bone.
Tell me when I'm telling lies.
I'll fight anybody. Who do you want? Just let me fight him.
Let me tell you something, Jim Ross.
Mega powers, yeah.
We're coming for you.
We are the best of the best.
Woo! Wheeling, dealing.
Smart marks.
And that's the bottom line, cause Stone Cold said so.
Welcome to another episode of Talk 'Em in the Building, where tonight we got a special one for you guys tonight. We're going to be looking at the unsung heroes behind the mic, our world of wrestling managers, as it were. So some of you hate them, some of you love them, but they're there for a purpose, and in some cases they're unforgettable. If you're new to the episode here, if you're new to the podcast, I should say, this is Talk 'Em in the Building, the podcast where we talk about the talkers, we hype the hype man, and we pontificate upon a promo. We'll do some real deep dives into promos, and tonight we're looking at it from the angle of pro wrestling managers, and we brought some legendary manager promos that left their mark on wrestling history. So as we dive in, I've been wanting to share, I've been desperately trying to share with you guys since our last recording, but I came across a real cool magazine that's going to be our lead-off point tonight. And this comes from the April 1992 edition of Sports Review Wrestling from the publishers of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And it asks the question, are you a real wrestling fan? Because even then, there was a little bit of tribalism back then in 1992, over 30 years ago. But as a really fun list, which we can get into at some point. But I'm going to adapt one of the questions here to get our conversation going tonight. And the question, and one of the ways that you can check yourself off is focus your attention solely on the blank during a match. And I'm going to ask this: have you ever focused your attention solely on the manager during a live pro wrestling match? Because televised is a little harder, but live. And if so, what things draw you to it? Sometimes it might be the dress, the way they dress, the way they're encouraging the audience participation, whether it might be the way they're, establishing character for themselves and for their wrestler. But, I'm going to go around here, got our co-host here, Adrian, Greg. I'm going to come to you, Greg, first. Have you ever focused, or maybe if you haven't focused, what are those things that draw you to a manager, especially at a live event? What kind of things make you stand out?
I never really thought about that before, but a couple things popped into my head as soon as you said that, like at a live show. And I think back to like Cornette, because he was so interactive with the audience. So he would get on, and you got to think about, back then those matches had a little bit more downtime, storytelling, but downtime. And the manager was part of that storytelling. And so much more interaction. So I think, I wouldn't say I concentrated on him the whole time, but you definitely were like, oh, lull in action. Now the action's kind of outside the ring with him gaining heat for his team. Does that make sense? So I think about him. Anybody else really? Not that I saw live. I remember seeing Bobby the Brain live, but not as much as I saw Cornette. Growing up here in Atlanta, WCW country, I saw Cornette all the time.
Yeah. So an extension of that, because now we're looking at a TV product, has there been anyone on TV that really, like, you could not deny that they wanted that attention?
Man, I mean, there's so few and far between managers now, and it's such a different world. I think there was, I wouldn't say currently. I mean, not for me, not currently, not in the last several years. I would say maybe early to mid 90s. I think it was there because it's much more of a prominent position. Like you had your stables, you had that, and so you had those guys who were out front. Like you think about, go back to Hogan. Hogan's feud, like people talk about Hogan Andre. It really wasn't Hogan Andre. It was Hogan Heenan.
Yes.
And you think about all those feuds he had, whether it was Earthquake or whomever, it was Hogan Heenan throughout their entire run. And so that was the focal point, really. So the manager had a much more prolific role because the feud was actually between the manager and that superstar.
And what an influence Heenan had on just the idea of a pro wrestling manager, right? And
Mm.
that's something that we'll circle back around to that later tonight. Adrian, same question for you. You know, you've been to plenty of live events. Is there anyone that like
For
stuck
sure.
out to you? Maybe like an indie manager or like a sidekick or somebody like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. The person that I'm thinking of immediately, and it's probably because she's just drop dead gorgeous, is
Mhm.
Scarlett Boudreaux. Um,
Yeah.
there was a show. I almost want to say it was you and me, Ali, that went in
Chicago.
Chicago.
I
Yeah,
remember it.
and she was the heater, and she really got into it
Mhm.
with a lot of the fans. Obviously, wrestling fans, a lot of them are a little nasty at the mouth, and she made sure to give it right back to them,
Yeah.
to the point of I almost want to say she did hit one of the fans. I don't know off the top of
I
my head if
remember that
that's
story
actually
very
what
well.
happened. Yeah.
I'll fill in the
So
blanks for you. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I would definitely say Scarlett, because not just because she's beautiful, but she's got some fire to her, man. Like when she's the manager, when she's used properly, she's money. When she's used properly, she is money. And I would say the same thing for her husband, Karrion Cross. If he's used properly, as we like to always criticize everyone of, well, they're not using them properly. Karrion Cross can be money for any company. It's just one of those. You just got to have them in the right situation. Now, going back to your question about television, Greg, I'm gonna actually disagree with you. I'm going to say Paul Heyman on television. One thing about Heyman, the past couple years in particular, during that tribal chief Roman Reigns run, where we would always see Paul Heyman, not even as a focal point, but in the corner
Mm.
giving all his reactions, and we all remember all the points of, oh, if it appears that Roman's about to take the loss, you just look at the side there on the ringside apron, and Paul is just giving his best performance ever, not saying anything. It's just complete visuals, the complete visual of his gesturing, that if Roman loses, my life is over, my worthiness is over. And it's those kind of dramatics that really win you over. Like, I don't even think that being live at a WWE show, you really get that full emotion, unless you're like literally ringside.
Hmm.
But watching on television during those matches, those big time matches especially, you could see him. And even in segments, now that I'm talking and thinking about it, there were segments where Jay and Roman are having a segment talking. Who do we see in the background? Standing to
Hmm.
the side, looking to Roman. If someone says something crazy to Roman, he's looking like, how could you say, those kind of
Hmm.
gesturing. And so I would definitely say Paul in particular, past couple years, absolutely stand out, and he's keeping the flame alive for the managers in today's pro wrestling.
I mean, with the change in the guard, it's something that we see embraced a little bit more, right?
Hmm.
Correctly, correctly.
Yes, right.
Um, so I'm going to fill in that memory gap for you. I specifically remember somebody being a little out of pocket in the first row with
Okay,
the scholar, and her eventually shaming him. I think some there was some water thrown at him or something to that effect.
that's what it
And
was. Okay, yeah,
he sat down, tried to play the cool guy the rest of the show. Everybody was just like, "Nah, dude,
right.
that's not
That's
happening."
what it was. That's
But it's
exactly what
interesting
it was.
because she's a
Yeah.
complete local, right? At the time she was doing the Indies, obviously known already. She was, I think she was managing a tag team. I don't recall who
Hmm.
they were, but
Hmm.
clearly the star of the match of that segment, and again knew how to give it back to the point that I know Seth Rollins, when they brought her up, when she knew she was coming up, he's like, "Oh, it's that kid, that brat that would hang around the indie shows in Chicago." That was like literally the description. So
Mm,
this is someone that truly got it from that fan perspective too. So
for sure.
cool mention, and certainly a tag team or a couple there that I think it do more with. But remains
That
to
was a
be
good
seen.
show.
That was a really
That's
good
a good
show.
show.
I still
Yeah.
quote that show today. Well, actually, it was actually honorable mention. Whoever Sammy Callahan's manager, that show was actually really good. Can't recall his name, but honorable mentions for myself lately have been prior to the dissolution in AEW. Don Callis, man, what a mainstay, what a go-to just come back as a different persona and someone that had left the industry really at that point and came back, and you really hate this guy, right? And it really he stands out more recently for me as someone that kind of fits that vein of a prototypical wrestling manager, the one that I hated growing up, watching ECW. I hated Bill Alfonso. I hated the whistle. I hated the demeanor. But now that he's like doing like meet and greets, I get it, because you could attach him to anybody, right? You had him with Taz, you had him with RVD. Then now he's like with anybody they'll basically attach to. It's the same guy. He's like so identifiable, so easy to follow. So clearly, you find your pocket, you find your role, and you make it work. So thank you for kind of getting the conversation started for tonight. And as we kind of deep dive into this idea of pro wrestling managers, Greg made a mention of it here, and we've all kind of talked about it here, but we don't really see this anymore as an art form, right? It's really this hybrid, like you're a wrestler, you're a sidekick, but the classic wrestling manager almost has like this incubation period in the business. And thinking about it from this perspective, I want to start off the night with a promo that I brought for a pro wrestling manager. One of my favorites, someone who has managed Hall of Famers, someone who's managed Hall of Famers before they were discovered and after they were discovered. I'm not going to introduce him as who you think it is, but you will clearly figure out who this person is.
Our World Heavyweight Champion. I understand that you have a very impressive man coming in.
Well, impressive is right, Mr. Bill Mercer. As a matter of fact, I've heard some rumors that you don't like me. Do you realize it's been 6 months since I've been invited to stand at ringside with you and to talk with the people? Do you realize it's 6 months?
Has it been that long?
Yeah, you don't like me, do you?
No,
you just like the rest of these people around here. Yeah, I know. You pick sides. I know all about you.
All right.
By the way, we do have a new man, as a matter of fact, and all you got to do is go out to the newsstands, pick you up a wrestling magazine, and you're going to see the face of Joe LeDuc. Come on, cameraman.
Oh, bloody.
If you can work them things there, I want you to get a little bit closer right here. Joe LeDuc, the Canadian lumberjack. Mr. Mercer, this is the most awesome man in professional wrestling. I have seen him pull a locomotive by a chain with his bare hands on a railroad track. I've seen him pick up the back of a car. You see about people not liking me? You see?
I see what you say. All right, we're going to look forward to Joe LeDuc. Let's talk a minute about the fact that Rick Rude has a rematch coming up, trying to regain the World Heavyweight Championship.
That's right. He does have a rematch. The rematch should have been a long time ago. It should have been right after the little incident at the 4th of July. I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Mercer. Mr. Chris Adams is a habitual liar. He's running around telling lies, and world-class wrestling ain't doing nothing but backing him up. One thing they wouldn't do for me. Chris Adams is giving title matches to other people. He's giving matches to Japanese people. He's giving matches to other people. But we should be the number one in line. And one more thing is Gary Hart. I want you people to realize, I want you to understand.
Now, he doesn't like you.
That I don't care about anybody unless they are in the Pringle dynasty. As far as Gary Hart's concerned, the magazines are putting out pictures, Gary Hart's picture right next to Percy Pringle's picture. I'll tell you what I think about Gary Hart. Gary Hart means nothing to me. There's Gary Hart. I don't care who you are. If you're not the Pringle dynasty, you don't mean a thing at all. That goes for you too, Mercer.
All right, now, you said I didn't like you. That's not true. But I got some fan mail from Mobile, Alabama.
I'm sure you
Your
did.
hometown.
Yeah, that's my hometown, WPMI, Channel 15 in Mobile. Yes,
and they
sir.
said, please quit mentioning that you were from Mobile because you were giving the city a bad name.
That's some more of your stuff, Mercer.
Oh, it's bad.
I'm sick and tired of you, just like I'm sick and tired of these people. You're going to see something new in the Pringle dynasty, brother. Rick Rude, Joe LeDuc, and there's no telling what other surprises I have in store for you. Gary Hart, get out of my way. Mobile, I love you.
And they don't love you. Come back and see us in 6 months, Percy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's bring it back. Shout out to Mobile, Alabama. Shout out to local affiliate.
Shout out.
Adrian, let me come to you. What are your reactions? You seen this young Paul, Percy Pringle, and we know what he's going to become We know who's
Right,
going to
right,
manage down to Austin and Undertaker and everybody else.
right.
Here it is. Here's the incubation of this.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's complete. I mean, complete two different worlds of what I knew him to be as Paul Bearer. Obviously, hair is completely different. He's gotten like what the top three buttons unbuttoned on the shirt, so he's showing a little chest there, chesticles there, and I just love the personality there, man. He's a nice sleazy manager. That's the
Hmm.
best kind there are. Sleazy. No one likes him. Hell, your hometown doesn't even like you. Like, I mean, that's perfect character work. Is Rude a baby face during that era
No,
right now? No.
there wasn't a great run.
Okay,
But
okay. Because I never, yeah, I never seen that before. But that's an awesome segment and awesome clip for sure, man. That's definitely a blast from the past for sure.
and shout out to the interviewer for keep poking at him. He knew his role,
Yeah,
Oh
right?
yeah.
true, true,
He's like,
true.
oh yeah, the hometown. Greg, I know you're super familiar with kind of
Hmm.
this specific era. I think just
Hmm.
even from going back to it. So, kind of give us your thoughts on this iteration of the character.
So what's funny is that obviously I remember Percy going and becoming pallbearer.
Oh
So
wow.
Hmm.
because being blessed here in Atlanta,
Hmm.
we got to watch World Class. So I see World Class all the time, and all of a sudden you went from this bleach blonde to this dark haired dude. I'm like, that's Percy. Um, I mean, but what's funny is it's like Adrian said, it's that old school manager. It's the sleazy used car salesman
Hmm.
personality. I mean, even down to the whole button, right? I mean, everything about that is used car salesman stereotypical. Um, and but we go back to the factions. We just talked about Bobby the Brain and how he was the feud against Hogan. You hear this, the Pringle dynasty, and so it was like he started mentioning Joe LeDuc. He mentioned Rick Rude. He managed a whole bunch of different people, and within world class. And so it's like, man, you know wrestlers with them. Why? Because the feud was against Percy.
Yeah.
The feud with Chris Adams. He
Hmm.
just talked about Chris Adams, who I think
Yeah.
had the title at the time. The feud was with him. So I mean but that promo, it got everything in there. I think it's interesting to see that little, like you said, that poke back and forth. And you think about the personalities that we allowed back then. We
Yeah.
forget, well, a lot of us forget about it, or because we became so produced that you don't have that interaction. Post Mean Gene, you definitely haven't had it.
Definitely.
You've gotten it a little bit more with Michael Cole, and I'll give Bailey that credit. Bailey started
Mhm.
that back and forth with Michael Cole, but that kind of goes back to what we just saw, that back and forth with Bill Mercer. I haven't been here for 6 months. You don't like me, and then they kind of have that back and forth. I remember Jim Ross used to have that back in WCW days, not WWE.
Hmm.
Um, and then UWF, and then Gordon Soley had it. They always had it in Memphis, so I think that adds to it. That adds to the a little bit of the quote unquote realism, a little bit more that um, organic interview, as opposed to just that whitewashed, ask the question, pass
Right.
back to you, Michael, type of thing.
It's more of a bridge with personality.
Yeah, yeah. I love that little piece he threw in there about Mobile.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure, for
and
sure.
Percy played it perfectly. How he had the smile, and yeah, Mobile. They don't like you either. Oh, I mean, they just flipped it, right?
Right, right,
And you
right.
know, none of that was produced. You know, none of it was produced. That's how good those dudes were.
On the off the cuff too, because like
Hmm.
Bill Mercer obviously he's not trying to play that grandiose personality,
Hmm.
but he's setting him up.
Hmm.
We talk about Mobile, we talk about how people hate you, and then the little button at the end, which I love that you caught the beginning. He says, "I'll see you in 6 months again." That
Yeah,
you can see like off screen, like he's reacting and saying like, "Get out of here, man."
but the other thing, I'm going to jump that back real
Yeah, yeah,
quick.
yeah, go ahead.
We think about these old school promos and how they've always they're so much better than they are today, where they promoted
Hmm.
their the shows or whatever. But what did they do in that little piece? They promoted the TV show in Mobile with the local affiliate.
That's
And it
right.
was like that little piece right there. if you were ever a local affiliate watching those shows and they said your station, everybody would pop like in the house, like, oh, they mentioned us. I remember watching those shows and then they mentioned Atlanta. Oh my gosh, they talked about us. We felt special. So that they knew what they were doing. It's just those little nuances, man. The little stuff that they had figured out. And World Class was well ahead of most everybody else with that stuff.
I love watching those because it's the same setup. It just we're gonna say something super specialized for your town or whatnot. Yeah, I love this era. I love the character because unbeknownst to me again, I came into it knowing he was Paul
Right.
Bearer, and he's the creepy looking guy who's a legit who was an authentic mortician. And I was reading up on his history. He like leaves like his kind of pro wrestling dreams or like whatever he was leading up to it to pursue this, and comes back after his I think his firstborn son was already like grown already for a little bit, and comes back and does it. But it was this that put him on WWF's radar, and eventually they give him the offers like, hey, we not the same character, but here's where Paul Bearer, ha ha ha. Unbeknownst to the company, they don't know he's a real mortician. That was after the fact.
That's
What
wild,
are the
man. That's
craziest
wild.
like coincidences of all time, right?
Yeah.
And we're gonna pair you one of the all-time greats, that eventually that you'll
Right.
be a crucial part of creating and establishing that character. But fast forward a few years later, he's post WWE or like in between one of the last runs that he had, because he ended up coming back obviously towards the end, before that was the last run. But he did a run here at a local NWA Hollywood, and they had him do this character. Obviously, at a later age. I mean, he was not that old when he passed away. I would think he was 58, I believe, is what I read. So he was still with it. And it was interesting because who was there around that time?
I know.
Eli, what's it? Go ahead, say it. You said it, right? Eli Drake slash
L.A.
A Knight.
Right.
So this man had Percy Pringle, Paul Bearer, in his back pocket, probably picking at his brain because if you know LA Knight, he's still like old school. He likes to really dig in and how can I elevate this guy? This guy is the promo? That's this whole
Right.
like gimmick, right? He is a
That's his
promo.
deal.
There was The Rock. The comparisons like you sound like The Rock and Austin like together. And here he is getting this direct influence from one of the greatest pro wrestling managers of all time. I think that's just fascinating and a real cool kind of Easter egg as you're seeing these characters, these pro wrestlers develop on a grander stage, knowing that their pedigree. Here coming up next, Adrian, I'm going to come to you next with your promo in terms of let me see surprises what you brought tonight with the pro wrestling manager.
All right, cool. So this is one of my favorite pro wrestling managers of all time for multiple reasons. I'm not gonna go too heavy into a bio, but I'm just gonna show it to you and you guys get a good quick reaction.
Oh my goodness! Sensational Sherri Mark. Oh boy.
Lance Russell, is that you?
It's not Lance. That's Corey.
Brother, you got to stab that candy bear. That causes cancer.
What?
Yeah, but...
Why are you here?
Why am I here? Well, let me see. If being a part of the World Wrestling Federation and the big star that I am, I'm always looking for any and every challenge that passes my way. Now, I have 3 things to say.
Okay. 1.
Number 1, there is a lady here, maybe not a lady, maybe a tramp. Yeah, that's what I said, a tramp. And she holds your lady's title. I happen to be a collector of titles and many other things, might I add. So therefore, I want to see what I can do about getting my little hands into her. Secondly, I've been scouting all over the world looking for new boy toys. Come here, sweetie. Come here. Come here, sweetie. Yeah, come here.
Oh, Brian Christopher, new boy toy, huh?
You tell me, girls, is this sweet or is this sweet? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Brian Christopher.
Brian Christopher. What are you doing here with these no-going aware people? And there's obviously no competition here.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right.
You should really, really think of coming back to the WWF with me, Brian. You really should, because, darling, you're just a sweetie and you got nice things. Okay, go back. Okay, I got one more thing to say.
All right, number 3.
I'll see you in just a minute, okay, sweetie? Wait right there for me. I got one more thing to say. I want everybody to stay tuned. Stay tuned, because Sensational Sherri has a surprise for everyone.
Oh, Miss Sherri Martell, the legend. Um, I'm gonna say that even though she is one of my favorites, that wasn't her best work, obviously, right, guys? She's at this point of her career where it's probably on the tailspin end of things, but you could still see certain elements of her character and what made her the heel that a lot of us grew up like enjoying, being scared of. Some guys were really into her. You know what I'm saying? Like you could see that of her. So I want to ask you, Adelie, what's your initial reaction to that promo by the legendary Scary Sherri?
I'm sorry, I was distracted by this, this April 1992 edition, because what is at
Nice.
the center of this
Nice.
magazine?
See? There it
All right.
is.
This is one year
Exactly.
removed from what you're talking about, right? And this is what comes to mind when I think of Sensational Sherri, right? Obviously, the classic. But seeing this under the kind of the scope or the lens of that era, that time, this was a big get, right? I mean, USWA, Memphis, this is, Jerry Lawler country. And they still had that. This was kind of that burgeoning relationship that not that they were a developmental for WWF, but they were one of the more preferred ones at the time. Rock goes through there at some point. There's a lot of connective tissue there. What strikes to me is she's selling herself as a big deal. She keeps saying, "I'm gonna bring you back to the WWF. Come on back to the WWF," and she keeps like name dropping that, kind of validating that she is this character, this person. Fascinating to me at the time is, you said it earlier, she's a woman, right? We didn't get female managers or prototypical managers in that sense, that were engaging, that were threatening, were scary, like you're saying, but ultimately that were this entertaining, because what did we think of the female character? Either you were a wrestler of whatnot, or you were eye candy, right? It wasn't, there was not an in between, and I think she fits that role so perfectly. And yeah, you can see the hesitation in some pieces, like not everything's rolling off her tongue for whatever reason, but the fact that you're still there, you're still performing, and you're truly believing who your persona is, because again, you're introducing Brian Christopher, which I love them and Too Cool. Like, I'm still of that era, but this ain't it yet. This is the most vanilla, generic. Like, I'm a hulking wrestler. Ha ha ha. I really love myself. I love putting oil on myself currently. But she sells it, right? She gives them a purpose, and she makes them feel more important, which ultimately that is the role of manager. Is, yes, you're elevating yourself, right? You're speaking to the wrestler and what a big deal this is, but ultimately if you're hogging the attention, you're not doing your job. You're not elevating the talent. And she does, right? And he leaves and everything, and it's back to her. But for that brief moment, like, oh, okay, cool. Like, so I never gave a damn about Brian Christopher, but like, why does she care about him? And by virtue, the proverbial rub, so to speak. So I love it. I love her look, and and everything of that era. And this just being a smaller venue for me feels like a big deal. It reminds me of like when they would do guest spots. They would set somebody, WWF or anybody would send someone down, and obviously
all the time there. All the time.
And it was like this guest star, and it really, to me, it's a testament to folks on that larger stage to come back and treat it as if they're still in front of a stadium or of an arena, right? And say, like, it doesn't matter if it's just a few people here. It's still a big deal to me, and I'm still playing this character as I would in any venue, essentially. So I think it's cool. Again, it makes me think of just other interactions I've seen her have with other wrestlers.
For sure. Greg, um, I'm Greg. You've been in Atlanta for all of your life, for the most part, and much like myself. Did you did you get Claremont Lounge vibes from Sherry? Listeners, if you know, you know. That's all I'm gonna say. Did you get those vibes like I did? I'll fill you
Yeah,
in afterwards.
yeah,
Backstage.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. So
Okay,
it's
cool.
interesting because I not it was like she would cry. Yes, there's like a trend now that you put that in there. It's like, you know what? There was probably a time she was at the Cheetah, and then by the time we started watching some of these promos, she's at the Claremont. So yeah, yeah, I feel you
Yes.
for sure.
I understand now.
It's like the strippers' retirement home, but it's fun.
They
It's
don't
a fun
retire.
place.
They
They
don't
all
retire.
got spunk. They still got spunk in them.
Yeah,
I'll promise you that. But continue, please.
but yeah, for sure. Um, but the one thing about Sherry that she brought, unlike most female managers, especially at that time, like you had your Missy Hyatts, you had your even the Sunnies or the Sables and all that kind of stuff, like in the mid '90s or early '90s, or even Alundra, not Alundra, geez, Marlena back when she was with the York Foundation,
Right.
Alexandria York. The difference is Sherry could whoop your ass. So there's a part of that okay, she had a certain look to her that appealed to a certain grouping. She had that, okay, I'm gonna be kind of trashy glamour, if you will, on the outside. But then if I need to, I'll get in there and mix it up.
Right.
And when she got put with Shawn Michaels, that took him to a different level. It truly did. If you've ever heard him talk about it, he said that was the best thing that ever happened to him because she had mentored him so much and stuff that she did for him and taught him how to be a heel. Because you think about it, he was never a heel until then.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good point.
coming into this promo, you see that she is the star. Whereas most managers are not the star or they're not supposed to be, but she came in from the big company here and is the star. So to your point out of lead, she bringing in Brian Christopher, that little interaction gave him a rub, elevated him immediately and made you think, oh, so she's gonna be with him. And what else did she say? You need to come back with me to the WWE. So
Hmm.
it was that type of thing, like I'm here for a little while, but I'm going back. And so I kind of curious if she was actually sent down there or if it was what type of thing that he'd go down there and work with some of these young kids to see what happens. I don't know. But I think what's more underrated, and you said that she was on the downside, but I would argue this is just in between because what she got with Harlem Heat, she took Booker
Ah,
T and
that's
Stevie
true.
Ray to a
Good
different
point.
level.
Very good point.
Because
Very
to
good point.
me, they were good, but man, when they got her with them, you saw both of them, their stars just shot up. And if you've ever heard Booker talk about her, he loved her, absolutely loved her. Unfortunately, she had some of her demons while she was with
Right.
them. But I mean, I would say Sean and Booker T. I don't know that they hit the levels of that they hit without her because of the confidence. They both said the confidence and what they learned from her behind the scenes,
Definitely.
from her being her manager. If you go back to watching her with Sean, she was kind of that focal point for a little while until he got comfortable. And then they moved her away. And then you think about how she became a little bit kind of behind the scenes a little bit with Booker T and Stevie Ray, but she kind of had that little let me talk and then I back out. Whereas with Sean at first it was like let me be the front person for a while. So I think that was cool to see that transition.
Man, that's a really good point, man. I didn't even really acknowledge the relationship with Harlem Heat because that really did put them over the top. Like you said, that definitely helped them, helped with their confidence, for sure as characters. And I mean, of course, you got to talk about her relationship with Macho Man.
Mm,
That quick run. I mean, that was a dynamic pairing,
hmm
and comparing what we fell in love with Macho as a babyface, for him to go Macho King during that
Yeah.
time, that was heavy stuff for a lot of us as kids. You know what I'm saying?
hmm
So
hmm
yeah, that's crazy, man. But yeah, that's she's one of my favorites. Hall of Famer, probably one of the wrestlers that I really do regret not meeting prior to them passing. Like I've been very fortunate to meet a lot, as both of you guys, of some of those legends that we grew up watching and enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely probably right at the top of the list for me
Wow.
of performers that I definitely regret not being able to at least say hello and thank you to. I love Scary Sherry for sure, man. And she was
So,
smoking when she back in the day, man. She was smoking hot.
so I have the flip side of that. I did have the pleasure to get to meet her, and
Cool.
I actually got to. So I had a friend, as you know, I know people who run shows or whatever.
Mhm.
I had a friend who ran a show. She was there, and I got to sit down and just talk. Like I hung out with her, and dude, as humble and as sweet as you could imagine. Like
Mm.
she didn't big time nobody. Now, then there were some other decent names on that show, but it was just like this is cool. It's like she was just so cool. And then like
Mhm.
I had done something, then I hear this kind of raspy voice, Greg. Yeah. Hey, do you know where I forgot what she would ask me, but just the fact she called me by my name.
That's
It
awesome.
was like it
That's
was
awesome.
cool. It was cool, man. It was cool.
Unforgettable.
I don't think I have probably have a picture with her somewhere because I was pre-cell phone, all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, just the fact I got to spend a little bit of time with her was so cool.
That's
Better,
dope,
better
man.
than the picture. The story's so much
Hmm
better.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
That's cool. Thanks for bringing that, Adrian. And
for
it's
sure,
kind
man.
of interesting just to see someone just become kind of hearing you talk and hearing Greg mention these things. This connective tissue of a lot of movements, a lot of character development across companies, even right, not just with one
hmm
company. So, yeah, great promo that you brought. Greg, I'm gonna bring it to you. I'm really excited to see how you close us out for our third promo tonight.
All right, so I think it's cool that we've all brought older ones. This is my favorite manager of all time for sure.
You see it, but you don't believe it. Say, where has the Playboy and the great Kabuki been? Where have they been? We have been beaten everyone in the mid-Atlantic and worldwide area. Now some of the people that I've had problems with in the past, they show up in Atlanta, Georgia, the Big Apple of the South, the place that's rocking and rolling. They tell me their Omni is packed. They tell me Roddy Piper is a big, heavy number there. You were once before. They tell me somebody's got to take care of Tommy Rich because the only thing he's doing is telling everybody that he's better than he ever was. If you people look back and you remember when Gary Hart and the great Kabuki was in Atlanta, Georgia, we were the kings of Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't Roddy Piper. Wasn't Tommy Rich. Now you got a new guy on the scene. I watched him. Pistol Pairs Watley, as bad as you want to be. I turned on the Superstation, sat down in my chair and said, now let me see what this Pistol Pairs Watley has to offer me, Gary Hart. What does Pistol Pairs Watley have that I'm after? Well, it seems like Atlanta, Georgia has found themselves a native son. They say that there ain't nobody that can beat Pistol Pairs Watley. Well, let me tell you, Pistol Pairs Watley, Roddy Piper come to get us and he ran out of ammunition. Tommy Rich's blonde hair got in his face and a little bit of green. So I don't care who it is. Make it Roddy Piper. Say, give us Roddy Piper. Give us Pistol Pairs Watley. Give us whoever. Because the boogeyman, the great Kabuki, is returning to the Omni. All right, there you have it.
I'm gonna come to you out of lead first before
Yeah,
I give a whole
of
bunch of
course.
my opinions on Gary Hart. What did you think about that?
So I come into this pretty cold. I have very limited kind of info interactions with Gary Hart. I know he's great. I've seen the retrospectives and the interviews and whatnot. But can I say like I know him? I know him as a manager? No, absolutely not. So I'm judging this purely on what I saw on the screen, the interaction. Few things strike me right away, just the way the camera's set up. I mean, it's almost like hilarious that you're supposed to take the great Kabuki somewhat seriously, I think. And never gonna forget that alliteration of Pistol Pete Watley. He said it about 15 times during the promo. So if you didn't know who that person
Hmm.
was, obviously we need Roddy Piper, but definitely something to consider. So what strikes me the most is it's very much creating the sense of authority of like, I am the Gary Hart. How are you going to impress me? What are we going to do about this situation, right? But also, I think going back to this conversation we've had all night is these good pro wrestling manager promos are selling a product, right? They're
Hmm.
reminding you if you're out of the loop of the storyline, which we always talk about nowadays, right? WWE does great kind of recap packages, but he's effectively giving you a recap package in a promo and telling you these are the foes. This is what I'm unhappy about. And I'm also gonna plug the Omni because that's the big kind of connective piece here is we're selling the Omni, and this is why you should care because I'm Gary Hart. I don't know who Gary
Mhm.
Hart is, but to me he looks like a guy I should be paying attention to because
Right.
he has some pull if he's name dropping all these other wrestlers, and here's this foreboding, you know, guy with nunchucks that you can start to hear the swing in the video that says nothing, but all I want to know is if Gary Hart has such high standards, this dude must be up to something clearly in the ring, and I want to
Hmm.
see it, and I want to see
No
it at the
doubt.
Omni. So when I really said I do want to buy a ticket, this would probably get me in just purely out of curiosity because if this is your manager, then gosh, what are your wrestlers like? This is amazing. So that was kind of my overall takeaway of it. Again, not having a lot of context for Gary Hart in his heyday.
Hmm. Adrian, what do you think?
Hart's voice, man. His voice is one of the most legendary voices in professional wrestling.
Hmm.
Like you said a little earlier, it makes things important. He forces you to listen to him, and whereas others' uh, voice doesn't sound more and more confident, the more and more he goes, the more confident he sounds. Like he's top dollar as he's essentially top dollar. He's one of the greatest managers of all time. Um, like you said, Ali. I mean, I'm just echoing your points of the fact that Gary is such a pro at it. He's hitting on all of the bullet points of anyone who doesn't have any proper context of the match or potential matches or potential storyline. He's giving you all of what you need to know. He's telling it to you, sounding confident as hell. And that's why you go back the next week to watch and see what happens next. That's why if they're in your town, you buy a ticket to go see what's going on with this guy. He's just a legend, man. He's one of the greatest of all time, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Was interesting, Adelaide, when you showed the Percy
Hmm.
promo earlier.
Yep,
If you notice, he addressed Gary Hart
that's right. He did.
because Gary Hart spent a lot of time in world class. But I think that's interesting because they were both heels. But also, I'm gonna kind of give y'all a little bit more history about Gary. Most of the time when he's in a territory, he was booking.
Hmm.
So when he's cutting a
Yeah.
promo, he knows where we're going. He knows
Gotcha.
what stars I want to get over, i.e., Tommy Rich,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., Roddy Piper's name, and Pistol Pez, because Pistol Pez at that time
It's
was hurt,
Pez Watley.
and try to get him over as a babyface.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other thing about Gary Hart, most of his stable were like Kabuki. They were monsters.
Hmm.
You're looking at Kabuki. One of the other ones I was gonna bring was Abdullah. He had
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
he had Muta. He had because Muta was kind of like the next iteration of Kabuki.
Hmm.
Um, and he had monsters all the time, like all the time. So if you go back and look at some of the old world class stuff, that's where he did a lot of his best work. He had, oh, man, he's actually the reason that Dusty turned face in Florida.
Hmm.
So yeah, you can go all the way back to that. And so it's interesting to hear what I like about his cadence. In this case, you hear him talking for Kabuki.
Right.
Right.
Um, Prior to this, the angle was about him and Dusty, Kabuki and Dusty, and they had this whole, which is interesting. This thing about this early '80s. and they had a match that the main stakes in that match were using kendo sticks.
Really?
Long before that little controversy overseas with the guy
Right.
getting beat up by kendo sticks. Yeah. So and I saw that as I was trying to figure out what Gary Hart promo do I want to pull. And they
Mm.
have like a series of like 4 or 5 different promos of that program of him and Dusty. And he pulls out kendo sticks. I'm like, man, like 1980, like something old.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that's cool. But I like the fact that the goal was talking him into the building. And
Right.
that's the difference today. And as we've, transitioned, because they're not making money off the tickets. I mean, they are, but that's not their main goal, right? So then it was the Omni. It was who are we going to wrestle? What are we going to do? Let's set up these angles. Let's set this up and make the importance of the Omni. How did I do that? In the Big Apple of the South, Atlanta. So it's kind of letting you know you got to come to the Omni to see this happen. Um, but I always looked at, like I said, I always looked at Gary as the manager of Monsters. However, he also had Al Perez later. If you're familiar with him, if not, think of a Seth Rollins, Ric Flair style. Like he looked like Seth Rollins. Like Seth
Hmm.
Rollins could be his son, and so, or like a Ric Flair. He was very just built, great worker, decent promo. So, but like he wrestled like a Flair, like that type of match, and very technician. So he would talk for him, but I always thought about him being like he knew how to dial his cadence and everything differently when he had Al Perez, or he had
Interesting.
others in his stable. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that's dope.
Yeah, he's just always been my favorite. I always felt like there's others who get themselves over all the time and
Mm-hmm.
almost over talk, where I felt like he was much more of a complimentary piece and sometimes a necessary piece. Like Kabuki's not going to talk. Abdullah's not going to talk. Um, some of the others he had, they're just not going to talk. And so he was able to be that voice for them. But then when he did have somebody who could talk, he could just dial it straight back.
You touched on something kind of leading up to this. You said like he would have known the angles. He would have known
hmm
where everything was going. Was he someone that always had that kind of influence, kind of where it was in a booking spot, or was that something that he elevated to from being in as a manager?
So I've read his book,
Yeah.
which is unbelievable. So he just seemed like he was a wrestler first,
Mm-hmm.
transitioned into a manager, um, and just kind of had the brain for it from what it,
Mm-hmm.
and it sounded like that no matter where he went, he was in those quote unquote creative or booking meetings
Mm-hmm.
and became that person. But he also didn't have an issue leaving. So it was right, wrong, or indifferent. There's plenty of times when you're reading that book and he's like, yeah, I didn't like it. This how this happens. So I just left. Okay. um, and like he's the reason the Freebirds went to world class. He's the reason
Mm.
certain people came to WCW. Like as soon as the Freebirds got there, he left, and they were like, "We're leaving too." He said, "No, you're in a good situation. Stay here. Do what you know." But I thought it's interesting that he jumped around a lot. He booked WCW or GCW, Georgia Championship Wrestling, for a long time under Barnett. He booked Australia. He booked a bunch of different places.
That's really cool.
Huge influence, like MLW, Court Bauer. If you've ever, he's a
Mm-hmm.
huge influence for him. Court Bauer looks at him as a mentor.
Mm.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Nice.
Interesting. Yeah, and that was curiosity for me because I mean, obviously, like a Heyman, now is like in that creative role as well nowadays,
hmm
and you wonder how much, to Adrian's point earlier tonight about Heyman, how like he does the positioning and all. Saying he's been in and behind the camera. How much of he knows, especially now that they are doing these year-long storylines, if not 2 or 3 year down the line, how much he's playing into that. He mentions that actually at the Hall of Fame speech, right? It's like something about you don't even know where we're at. We're like
hmm
we're barely on first base or whatever he said in
hmm
terms of the storylines going on currently. Thanks. That's really cool, and it makes me want to go check out a little more Gary Hart stuff and educate
Definitely.
myself
And
for that
Definitely.
era and really like his influence on everything.
I think the cool thing of the 3 we brought, and we'll say 4 because we talked a lot about Heyman.
Right.
They all were able to transition and change their characters and change their style of manager with their talent. And that to me makes the best managers. That's why I say Gary Hart's the best. Or I think Heyman's the best at this point. Heyman had that Cornette-esque style in the early 90s, became a little bit more hardcore later on. But if you ever watched him back then, he knew how to manage with Austin and Pillman compared to Zabisco and compared to others. Or to compare, then later on, look at how he did Brock to Roman. If you could just look at that time frame, just that time frame alone tells you how great he is. Because he said, I can't be the same person. So with Brock, I'm the voice, I'm his his advocate, and I'm all these different things, and I'm gonna be, I'm here and he's protecting me. Like I'm confident because he's protecting me. But then with Roman, it's worshipness. And he also has that I love him. But you got to think, and they didn't tap into this enough, I don't think. He managed Rikishi. He managed way back then.
That's
So you
true.
got to think about all the way back. He was part of that bloodline, and in the early '90s with the Samoan SWAT team. So he managed them. So now that feeds in because if you ever hear him talk about it, he does allude to that, and he alluded to it early on with Roman, and it's like that's part of the reason why he's so worshipped, because he actually in real life credits Afa and Sika for his career.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I'm here to worship you because of them. Out of respect for your dad, out of respect for Afa and Sika, I'm here for this. So much behind the scenes plays into it, but just the fact that he could do that. Think about Sherri, how she transitioned from wrestler to being with Flair, being with Macho Man, how she did those different, how she did Shawn different, how she did Harlem Heat different. Look at Gary Hart, what he would do with Al Perez compared to um, Kabuki compared to Abdullah, you'll see how he managed the different monsters. That to me makes them the greatest.
Yeah.
And
Those are
the
good points. Very good
longevity of it
points.
all, right? To be able to do it at that
Hmm.
level
Hmm
for that long and be trusted with the great points. I thought that was great. I really enjoyed. It's this is something we've been wanting to do for a little while. As if you a little peek behind the curtain, we think of ideas for the shows, and this was one that immediately shot up the list because and we barely scratched the surface. We'll have to do a part two for other ones because
Oh yeah.
gosh, I could go on for a while looking at good manager promos as it were. Usually to close the night here, we bring another video, but I've been dying to go over this magazine with y'all, and I'm gonna have you
Love it.
just
Bring it on.
humor me, and if you see one of these from the checklist that you resonate with, I want to hear a little more about it because I'm gonna share one of them myself. So I won't go through all 37 or 38 at this point, but I'll go through a few more. Some of them are on the cover. Shout Woo in the library.
Hmm
Collect 20 photographs. Know your holds. What is another one? Follow a wrestler's career from rookie debut to world champion. I think we've all done that at this point.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Attend a workout session with your favorite wrestler.
I'm gonna pause you for a second.
Yeah.
Go back. Who have you followed? Like who did you
Well,
watch
that's
when they
the
first
point.
came in?
Here's the content for the show.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Who have I followed? I mean,
hmm
we always talk about we go to indie shows, right? So
hmm
we have a very very specific niche, perspective that we can say someone's been from the beginning. I won't say I saw him from the beginning, but I'm thinking someone we talked about tonight in the wrestling sense. I was there when Karrion Cross was doing indies and literally came in to do a show in LA.
Hmm.
Everybody yelled, "Please come back." And he did the most respectful, like, "I can't believe it. Thank you so much for having me tonight." And to see him, obviously, he's a younger guy and, things have happened, but it always fascinates me to see guys like that you see come in, you know, they're not sure if this is going to be the career move, right? They're all all in because obviously you do this without a net a lot of this, and a lot of wrestlers do. They're like, this is my career. It's this or nothing else. But to see those little microcosms of you know these people that have nothing to their name in the wrestling world, and see them slowly creep up, and the next time going around, I always tell my friends that I bring to wrestling shows that aren't wrestling fans, like, you see that guy, when I know, because right? You
Mm-hmm.
can spot them from a mile away when they're stars. And I say, I'm gonna be paying $100 for his meet and greet in about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. What are
Mhm.
you talking about? It's like, look at this guy in the ring. Watch this promo, or watch how he does mannerisms, or she does mannerisms in the ring. There's a few like that. One that unashamedly I like in the Indies was Candice LeRae, and that's another one that the pro run hasn't got the WWE run hasn't gone as well as it could have, but man, she's potential, and I think it still has an opportunity to get there. But that's
Definitely.
someone that I can see, like, she was doing indie shoes over here in southeastern Los Angeles in front of 20 people, and was just doing it with the same attitude, and was up there with the boys because that's the way she came up, right? Those are the two immediate ones that come to me. Does anyone come up to you, Greg?
AJ Styles. So
Yeah,
Right on.
I
definitely.
remember watching him all over the place. I remember being at one of Dusty's shows, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. Uh, some of the boys and myself were going out to eat, and if you know him at all, he's very, very, very Christian.
Hmm.
Um, and we were going to Hooters, and he declined. And his thing was just like, and we were like, well, we can go somewhere else. He said, nah, I'm just gonna go ahead and go home to the family. And I had much respect for him for that. Like, just having that conversation. He's like, no, I'm good. We're like in Carrollton or something like that. And it was just so real cool. And I'd run into him a few other times, but he was just always real cool. It's one of those ones that you just watch him be like, dude, he has an it factor if he can get over that voice. But it was like he was so southern. But I mean, he had such an it factor of about how he worked in the ring, and not just the high flying stuff, everything else. I mean, he was one. Austin Theories was one. Just seeing him
Yep.
some, and I'll say Ricky Starks. Like, I only saw him in NWA. I didn't see him
Mm.
before that. But being at those NWA shows here in Atlanta, and I was like, I remember my son and I going. I said, that dude's gonna be a star. Like,
Hmm.
there's something about this dude. The fact he's not bigger than he is right now drives me crazy. But I'm like, that dude just has star written all over him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
those are good choices, man. Those are really. I was gonna say Austin Theory for sure because I definitely
Really?
remember him, and
Hmm.
yeah. Um, some that come to mind. I meant Cody.
Mm.
I remember Cody when he was in high school. Like, we're the same age. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being a former wrestler, I remember seeing the last name Runnels and my dad saying, that's Dusty's son. I'm like,
What?
bullshit. And now I look and I'm like, holy
What?
shit, that is Dusty's son. Um Dusty, yeah, Cody for sure. Austin Theory, absolutely. Two names on the women's end pop up for me. Kiera Hogan.
Ooh, good one.
We definitely saw her coming up here in Atlanta. And now she's on roster with AEW, and we're always trying to cheer for her whenever we do actually see her on TV. And Gigi Dolan of WWE.
Yeah.
Like, she was a mainstay here in Atlanta wrestling and did her thing and came through. Last one, Darby Allen. I remember Darby wrestling independence. I want to say, Greg, we were at a show together
Hmm.
and he wrestled there. And I remember making the note of, I like that guy. He's a good seller, but he's kind of crazy and he makes a really annoying noise when he's selling.
Oh, really? What's the
I
noise?
want to say I told Greg that. I was like, the dude huffs and puffs. He's like, uh, uh, he did that throughout the whole match. And I was like, this dude is so good. But that little thing was so annoying. I was
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
hope someone coaches him out of it because
Hmm.
that's annoying as hell. I would get behind him as a babyface if it wasn't for that. But I don't know.
That's
That was,
hilarious.
yeah. And now he's on AEW
Right?
week,
Oh my
every
god.
week going, so
You get the
I'll,
word
I'll
of
give you
Timmy,
one.
maybe
I'll
got
give
a
you
man.
one other one though. There was one other one that I pulled for. So you know the referee that's on WWE now. She was in NXT for a while. Um, Daphne LaShawn. She's the one that R Truth hugged the other night.
Hmm.
She used to wrestle here as Asia. She used to wrestle. She was AEW, AWE, Atlantic Wrestling Entertainment.
Yes.
She used to be other
Yes.
places,
Yeah.
and she went down there to NXT for a tryout, and they offered her a referee job.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember her saying, "This is what they offered me," and I'm like, "Freaking do it!" And
Hell
I wasn't
yeah.
that. It wasn't like I was there, but it was like she was like, I'm going for it." And everybody's like, there was a lot of people like, "Oh, do you want to do that?" She's like, "I want to be in this business,"
Mm-hmm.
and she went down there. So it was just kind of cool to see her actually make it as a referee, make it into NXT, and now like on the main roster doing all her stuff. So
You
that's
talking
cool.
about Jessica, right? Jessica Carr?
What's her actual name? I don't. Let me see. She wrestled as Asia. I think her real
Oh
name is
no. Okay. I
her
didn't know
real,
she wrestled
yeah,
in Atlanta.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
Asia Smith.
yeah,
Daphne. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
yeah. She used to
Leon
wrestle.
Ruff's wife,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Yeah. I
Yeah,
saw
she
Huh.
like
wrestled around here for a while, but she never was like like Austin Theory was everywhere. She wasn't like that. She was like more a little bit. I would say a little
okay.
bit lower than that. She
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing mucha
It's
lucha type stuff, but
it's so interesting you mentioned that because I feel like now wrestling schools also do like referee training too. And just
Mm-hmm.
like that, we're like,
Makes
okay, like
sense.
this is I mean, a lot of times it's the opposite, right? Like you said with her.
A- And
Um
the other woman wrestler on WWE, Jessica Carr, she used to wrestle in Atlanta.
oh, did she?
Yeah, she
mhm.
wrestled. She did a couple Atlanta wrestling entertainment shows.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. That's why I thought when you were talking about her, I was like, "Is that who he's talking about?" But now that you say that, that's
Right.
pretty cool. That both of those
Mm-hmm.
refs are
That's awesome.
from here in Atlanta. So that's
Um
dope.
yeah, that's cool. I love where this conversation went. So thank you, Greg, for picking up. I'll give two honorable mentions only because they're local guys, and one of them people hate for some reason. I get it. One is Brody King because he's a total Van Nuys guy here. Went to Santino's where they did some shows and they actually did a lot of indie matches with Darby. Now that you mentioned it, including one in a bar where there was no ring, if I remember
Nice.
correctly, before they were signed. And another one, not the same way, but someone that I saw just coming up in the indies in LA, Rick Knox, the referee. That dude's been around forever and
Hmm.
is became a character of his own down here. And if you go to an AEW show, you're gonna undoubtedly hear over the top, and they like the deal. But yeah, I could get into stories of like cool stuff he's done on the indies. That
Hmm.
I'll tell in a different scenario. Well, gentlemen, my compadres over here at Pro Wrestling, we did it again. Thank you, listeners, for kind of, sometimes it feels like we're eavesdropping on our conversation because these conversations feel real fun. It was like hanging out with friends as usual. And if you liked it, comment, subscribe, give us a like, follow us. I've seen more engagement on the, on the YouTube comments or whatever you can bring to the table, and just tell us what your opinion, tell us your thought, give us some memories of a wrestler you followed from beginning to now in stardom. uh, if you do that, you got to prove that you're a real wrestling fan. So tonight, go start a button jacket, go buy a photo zine, communicate with other fans, buy a computer modem, or compile your top 100 wrestlers of all time. But don't do it without buying a satellite dish, attending 7 cards and 7 nights, or attending a wrestling fan convention. Most of all, come back, give us another listen, another watch here on Talk 'em in the Building. From Greg, from Adrian, this is Ali wishing you a good day and a good night.